Hello, everyone. It's Shane Conto, your Wasteland reviewer, and welcome to the Development Hell podcast. And this is the movie club where we have reconvened, and we're going to be talking about baseball and the love of baseball. And I can't do it better than James Earl Jones, but we'll certainly talk about it. And we got Joe, we got Kevin, we got Vinnie here to talk about this 1989 fantasy baseball drama. Iowa farmer Ray Kinsella is inspired by a voice he can't ignore to pursue a dream he can hardly believe. Supported by his wife, Ray begins the quest by turning his ordinary cornfield into a place where dreams can come true. And for the record, the Field of Dreams actually exists, and they have Major League Baseball games there, which is pretty cool. Some of us here are big baseball fans, and I'm sure we'll throw that in there. But let's do our regular. How did you how did you come to this movie? How many times have you seen it? Your general thoughts, and let's go, Joe.
So I would say that this would probably be like the fifth or sixth time that I've seen this. It was on a lot in HBO. In fact, it was on at a really good time when I was playing Little League, um,
Nice.
probably like fifth or sixth grade. At the time, it's a very easy, as a kid, it's a very easy movie to understand and conceptualize and all the emotions and all the feels. I felt even then, but watching it again after all these years, and I want to bounce this question to you guys, maybe as we talk. Do you guys feel like this movie is a science fiction or more fantasy? Or do you think of it being a little bit both? And if it is both, like how much do you think it leans to science fiction versus how much you lean into it being fantasy? Because watching it a second time, I feel like, and again, we could talk more about this as we go. Um, the distinction between the Ray's the main character, right? Kevin
Correct.
Costner's character.
Yep.
Ray being a child of the 60s, which is more new age and more, free thinking versus his father's generation, which is much old school, work hard, more practical, right? I feel like the concept of Field of Dreams walking between being magical and fictional, like in sort of that way, versus being this, as it was described at one point, being a nexus point. Like his backyard is supposed to be like this nexus point between reality and like the afterlife. Um, which to me, I would love if this movie would have made more movies or if they expanded on that. Like, what if it's not just baseball? Like, what if, like other ghosts from like other realms start coming into it? Like, it really feels like a Twilight Zone, one of those happier Twilight Zone episodes. Like, we all think of Twilight Zone as being like dark and like foreboding, like Black Mirror. But the reality is you have Twilight Zone episodes, which are more, fun and emotional and more lighthearted, but still playing with this concept of like what is real versus what is fictional, and really get you thinking about that. I mean, otherwise, I'm glad I got the chance to see this movie again, and if anything, I think it's kind of cool that it got me thinking that way because for like I said, for the longest time, just kind of thought of this as being like a fun, magical fable like story.
I did not remember Kevin Costner building a giant warp gate into heaven,
A
but
Stargate.
we we're gonna, I guess we could have that conversation. And I guess if you ask certain people who are very religious, calling this fantasy is kind of disrespectful, I guess.
Right.
But
The
we're gonna
court's
talk
out
about
there.
that. All right, Kevin, how about you?
So this was my very first time seeing this movie. This has been on my watch list for a while. I never got around to seeing it. I guess I also didn't really quite know what this movie was about. I knew it had to do with baseball, and I knew it had something to do with ghosts. That's all I knew going in. Um, I was pleasantly surprised. And to answer your point, Joe, I would definitely call this a fantasy movie. Um, it's funny because I was watching this with Shane yesterday, and I made a little joke to him. I said, as soon as Kevin Costner stepped out into the cornfield, I said, "This is like Signs. This is in the same universe as Signs." Yeah. So I guess if they were aliens, that were creating that portal. There's a possibility, but I like that it goes unexplained for the most part. We don't know how the portal works. Um, I also I've I thought of this after the movie. I felt some callbacks to like Interstellar, or I guess the other way around.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I felt a similarity to that, just the way they treated how the phenomenon is happening. Like Interstellar, spoilers for Interstellar, by the way, but you know he has this portal back to his daughter in a way through time, and I don't know. It was an interesting mechanic. It also kind of reminded me of Bill and Ted with the constant time travel and interaction with historical figures. And I had to have Shane look this up while we were watching it. They came out the
Confirmed.
same year.
Both released in 1989. So
So audiences back in '89 had their fair pick of movies dealing with historical figures being plucked at a time. No, but I really liked it. I thought the wife, what was her name, Annie?
mhm.
She was very supportive given the circumstances. And in the end, I liked how the brother-in-law came around too. Uh,
Yes, 80s
very,
Jason
very fun.
Lee, as I pointed out as we were watching the movie, because he has
He
the
was,
same
yeah,
voice as
he would
Jason Lee.
definitely, he would be played by Jason Lee if it came out uh,
Doesn't look like him
15
at
years
all, though.
afterwards.
He has the
No,
same voice. If you go back and rewatch this movie with that in your head, you will not be able to unhear it.
that was the Mark character, right?
I
That was his
hate
name.
him so much, but we'll get to that.
We'll have a discussion about that. I have my own thoughts about Mark.
Yep. How about you, Vinny?
So this is one that's been on my watch list for a while now. So I'm glad I finally got to watch it. I'm I was never a huge sports fan, but I'm always up for like a good sports movie, and this one definitely fit the bill. Um, I thought Kevin Costner gave a great performance, as did Amy Madigan and James Earl Jones and Ray Liotta. Um. In terms of like whether or not I think it leans more towards uh the fantastical or the supernat or the or science fiction. I would definitely say it probably leans more towards the fantastical and supernatural. Just because like I mean with me, like when I think of science fiction, I think of like space travel, like advanced technology, robots, like it's like that sort of like those sort of like typical sci-fi touchstones. But with this movie, it deals with ghosts, and it deals with ghosts and hearing voices, and so that's kind of like the reason why it leaned more towards the fantastical for me. I thought I don't know. I thought like at times it did feel like and this isn't a complaint. Like I'm just saying like it did feel a little like a little Spielbergian to me because you have a small town American family that's facing a crisis that come that come face to face with like the fantastical or supernatural and it just have like a very like classic uh like a very classic like family fantasy drama sort of feel to it. And I don't know, I really want to read the book now and just see how it compares.
It's a very different experience. I can at least tell you that. Um, which is very interesting because like this book was written by W.P. Kinsella. And there's something interesting in like that layer of like channeling a like autobiographical kind of feel and talking about that. But how many times have I watched this movie? I don't know. It's a lot. This was something that I watched a lot as a kid. Kevin can attest as he watched it with me. This was one of my oldest DVDs to the point where back then I'm like, oh, I hate these little black boxes and stuff like that. I'm getting full screen everything because I was an idiot. Regret that with some of my choices. Was on my DVDs because full screen is the only, widescreen is the only way to do it. The only way to watch movies. Because we had like the box cut out on my 4K TV watching it. But this is a film that, like, I've been a baseball fan since I was 10 years old. So like this hits on a different level for me than just, watching a movie. And I think it's one of the most unique baseball movies because this isn't about building up to a bottom of the ninth or a pitching gem or anything like that. This is something about the love of baseball and what it can mean for relationships and connecting with others. And at the heart of this film, it's about a father and a son. And just there's so much emotion in each of you made some interesting points to build off of. Like Vinny one, you mentioning this gives a very Spielberg kind of vibe. It does. I actually, when I popped this in, when Kevin and I started watching, I had to look up the director because I'm like, who even directed this? Um, and it's Phil Alden Robinson, who apparently directed films like Freedom Song and The Sum of All Fears and Sneakers, which is interesting. This is definitely his most famous movie then. Um, it's interesting, Kevin, that you brought up Interstellar, because I didn't really would never have made that connection, but that like connection between parent and child that's connected across time and space, and specifically in this case, and in terms of the afterlife. And what I love most about this film is it's a faith-based film. Like this is literally dealing with heaven and baseball players coming back from the other side and stuff like that. It's a faith-based film that doesn't beat you over the head with it. Like obviously it's like right there in front of you, but it's not preaching to you. And if anybody's going to preach to me, I want it to be James Earl Jones. Because Terrence Mann, I love that character so much. And his speech that he gives about baseball. If anybody ever tells me or tells a baseball fan, oh, why do you like baseball? You should show them that clip. And it's that convincing and so powerful because like James Earl Jones like could literally say anything and would feel the weight of it and everything behind it. And this has such a great cast. I think this is one of Kevin Costner's best performances because I feel like this really hits a nerve in terms of who he is as an actor. He really represents that like Americana kind of feel. Ray Liotta, who has a very subdued performance in this until he gives that laugh when he's talking about Ty Cobb. That was fantastic. And also, I like how they just casually had Burt Lancaster pop up in this movie, and he's just so goddamn charming. Buying blue hats, and I better get home before the thing have myself a girlfriend. And just like, damn, Burt
And
Lancaster.
interesting tidbit is how Costner and Leona, they both starred in this, and then the year after they starred in Goodfellas and Dances with Wolves, which ended up going toe to toe for Best Picture.
Huh.
I would like to point out one of those should have won Best Picture, and it wasn't the one that won Best Picture.
What movie went against Dances with Wolves?
Goodfellas.
Goodfellas.
I
Oh,
guess you could
okay.
say it was funny how.
Oh,
Which, honestly, this movie's legitimately funny. There's a lot of
Yeah.
moments where I thought it was like legitimately funny. I think one of the biggest things for me rewatching this was the fact that I did not remember this being an hour and 45 minutes. Like this is
It
like
kind of flew by.
tight. Like this is a tight movie
mhm.
and it moves well for sure. But I guess um I think probably the biggest thing to talk about is the whole mechanism of the ghosts coming back and this whole entire idea of things. this is such a fascinating idea for a movie. And I just feel like this movie executes it so well because it captures the magic of baseball. It captures there's an aura about this film, and they don't over explain anything. Like Joe, I know you were like, we need more sequels to this. I'm like, I I'm
It's still
glad
be
that
open.
there's a lot of possibilities here, but I'm even glad that like we don't know what Terrence Mann learned
Yeah.
when like he went to heaven. And just I think one line in this movie really captures this tone, and it's the where Toolish Joe's like, "Is this heaven?" And Kevin Costner's just like, "No, it's Iowa." And it's just like there's humor in it, but there's also like this mystique and a adulation for what makes America just like that Americana kind of feel and why baseball's so closely connected to it.
Yeah.
But I guess what are some of all of your thoughts about like the whole ghost aspect and this supernatural element to this film?
So I want to jump to what Kevin said because it's the reason why I was leaning towards the question I had about does this count as science fiction versus
Mhm.
being, fantasy? Because Interstellar was the movie I was thinking about when I thought about that. I thought of Field of Dreams as being like where it's not over explained, whereas I feel like Christopher Nolan has such a habit, and it works in his favor when he gets to the mechanism as to like why things are happening. But Interstellar was one of that movies where I felt like it did kind of lean into like something that goes beyond science and science fiction into being more fantastical. Whereas from the setup, seeing the ghosts and having the layout, and then like the more and more you get into like, and this is why I was thinking about this, like if it were just like traditional fantasy, I feel like it would be focused on Kevin Costner being the only one that could see the ghost. But it isn't just Kevin Costner's; it's his wife. Which, and another thing you brought up, Kevin, so great is that in most movies, the wife would have a hard time, and she does have a hard time because when it comes to the bank foreclosing and not being able to pay, you know, pay the money, that's when she has a hard time with him. But she's very supportive because she's also seeing it. His child's also seeing it. Eventually, people are seeing it. Which now that we're talking about it, I agree with you, Shane. I think it's because of the magic of baseball. Like when they say like on baseball being as American as like apple pie, like the whole idea of like this is the thing that's going to bring people together. Like we don't know how, we don't know why, but people are going to come from miles away so that they can relive the glory days and see all their favorite players being able to play on the field. And I'm not going to lie, I think as a New York sports fan, I always get a kick over the fact that the New York Giants was started off as a baseball. The New York Baseball Giants started
Mhm.
off as a baseball team, as with what's his name, Lancaster's character,
Moonlight Great.
Light, exactly, was a New York Giant.
Yeah. Did you appreciate the little lot? Like, I love the little voiceover at the beginning too, and when he's like, "My dad was a Yankees fan, so
I
I
had to be a
obviously."
Brooklyn Dodgers fan.
It
I
was like,
appreciate that so.
wow, being a little jerk, being antagonistic to your dad.
But here's the thing about that though. As I found out when watching this recent World Series playoffs, my dad and a couple other cousins only became Yankees fans because they couldn't stand all their fathers, my grandfathers losing the Mets, and the Dodgers moving on to LA. So they became Yankees fans because they couldn't stand watching all their dads and other family members get mad and like, could you believe the Mets? So that line did hit for me.
There you go. Kevin, I think you were going to jump in and say something.
Oh yeah, just about the mechanism of the portal. I do like, as you were all saying, I do like that ultimately it's unexplained. Uh, but to just think about it a little bit, it kind of doesn't matter what the exact physical mechanism is, because to parallel it with Interstellar again, in Interstellar, the entire setup is sci-fi. It's based in kind of reality. He's going on a spaceship, and then it turns fantastical later. Kind of the same thing here. The initial setup is a little physical. He's hearing a voice. That's the part he can't explain. So it's a little different in that respect. But he's setting it up himself. He physically built the baseball field. It's not like it appeared out of thin air. He had to do that part himself. And then that's when it all kicks into gear. And I like that we don't know if it's aliens. We don't know if it's ghosts, or if it's some type of religious thing. I like that.
I would just like to say my wife's favorite thing to say while watching this movie is that Kevin Costner totally would have been taking a grippy socks vacation. The white jackets would have been showing up to take him away because he was having a psychotic break.
Wait,
I agree with
a what?
her on
A
that.
what kind of what kind of vacation?
A grippy socks.
I've never heard that term.
When you're in a hospital,
Well, now you have.
now you know.
Well,
Urban
it's
Dictionary it.
it is very interesting because Vinny, you brought up the Spielberg thing because this is very much not Close Encounters, where like family leaves him, like wife's like bye. And it is like Joe, you mentioned, like she is extremely supportive, and I think I just love Amy Madigan in this. She has so much energy and zeal to her. Like, I didn't think the most relatable topical thing in this movie was going to be the PTA meeting,
Oh
which,
man, when that scene came on,
and
You
I
know,
think I said this exactly to Kevin was,
the
I
prelude to
wish
it.
that we weren't watching a movie that is what 35 years old and it's still feeling topical today because things don't change.
I was just gonna say that.
When she goes, God damn, they're thinking of burning books again. I was like, yeah, tell me about it.
Just
Calling
take
them a bunch
comments
of
for like Maga,
fascists. I'm like, God
Yeah.
damn it. And which is funny because, like, we're recording this literally 2 days before the election. So
Oh yeah.
it's, it's.
On wood,
That
guys.
scene was very timely.
I wish it was that easy to beat fascism. You got that whole entire room full of Iowans to turn uh, against Ava Braun, frickin' Nazi. Uh, but
Imagine
like,
being in Pennsylvania, where I am, where it's a swing state. Like the vibe is so much stronger here because of that.
there you go. It's such a this is such a fascinating film because there's so many layers to it because it does have that whole 60s hippie kind of like him like I went to Berkeley. I just love when James Earl Jones when he's super frustrated he's like peace,
Oh,
love, smoke dope and slams the door
I did
behind
quote
it.
that a lot as a kid. That line, I thought, like, we're talking about this movie being funny. That scene always makes me crack up. And it gets funnier with the whole thing with him shooting him, like, you don't have a gun. Like,
Not
it's
a gun. Know me. He takes
Well,
out a crowbar.
speaking of the '60s, I thought it was like a nice little visual joke. How like when he's looking at the mailboxes to figure out which one is his, which one is Terrence Mann's, and it has like a sticker on it. It says like tie dye something, and I was thinking, oh, tie dye was like that was like a popular a popular fashion trend in the '60s. So like, I was like, oh, it's a nice little joke there.
so
I oh, go ahead, Joe.
I have a question because we brought up earlier about Terrence going into the field and not knowing if he comes back. Um, so a couple things that I'm thinking about because there was a scene earlier where I guess they say he goes missing, like they find out like he wants to contact.
Yeah, because his dad called the police because he didn't answer his phone for like 2 days.
Right. So now, when I was a kid, I just assumed he like moved on and became, one with the field, and he's never coming back. But then I thought about it a second time, and I'm like, he's a writer. He is kind of a reporter. You know how they have beat writers for like sports? I
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
figured he's going to be like the journalist. He's going to be like the beat writer to all these
Yeah.
games, and that's his role. Not necessarily that he dies.
I know. I think he comes back, but I don't need to know what he saw.
Right.
I feel like,
I'm of the opinion he came back too. Yeah.
well, yeah, like, can you imagine the world that he comes back to when he goes and writes, like, I went to heaven, and what that would stir up in especially 1989? Uh, Pretty crazy. And I'm just imagining like what the world is like after. And that's the thing. The more you think about it, there's so many things you could explore, but like the whole world's gonna know ghosts exist because
Well,
like there's people coming in here and watching these
yeah.
players play and stuff like that.
So I just want to
That-
say, Shane, I'm a huge fan of unsolved mysteries. And the
Oh,
late 80s, early 90s were chock full of people saying, I went to heaven, I saw Jesus, I spoke to
I
God.
married Bigfoot.
I don't know if he would stand out that much if he wrote a piece like that.
Well, but the thing is, people are gonna know this kind of stuff is
Oh, yeah,
actually
right.
happening.
People
So
will
like,
show up. People will show up, and that's going to attract attention. That's one
yeah,
possibility, at least.
So I can't help but say this too, that he goes there and he realizes he goes to the land where everything the light touches belongs to us as part of the circle of life. Listen, he's the perfect guy to go into heaven. I mean, he's Mufasa, so kind of
there you
works
go.
out.
I what's so impactful and poignant though, and like this is where the film gets really sentimental, is the fact that like this was not about Shoeless Joe. This was not about Terrence Mann or Moonlight Graham. At the end of the day, if you build it, he will come so that he could have a catch with his dad. And it's just like, oh,
Right.
grown men
Every
all
goddamn
over.
time.
He was building a connection to his father all along. Who knew?
And that's the power of what this film really is about,
Yeah.
that connection, because they're like baseball can bring people together and have like this relationship. And like I had like my brother and I, like, do we talk about real life stuff on a regular basis? No. But are we always talking about baseball? Yeah. It's like you build those kinds of connections, and he reconnects with his father. And like I wish I could remember how I reacted as a kid when it's revealed like that catcher was his dad. And you're just like, damn. And it was all about that all along. And it's such a moving and poignant film. And there's just so many like iconic, powerful images of like there's something special about watching Ray Liotta dressed up in like period accurate White Sox uniform from like 1919 as Jules Joe Jackson snagging fly balls. And just the atmosphere, how it's shot, the music. The music is I think particularly important in this one, like building up that feeling.
I think it
And
was nominated for I think it was nominated for an Oscar.
oh, it should have been.
Oh, the
Um
music?
Yeah.
Is it
Okay.
James Horner? Is it James Horner?
Hmm.
Horner? Damn.
I don't know if I looked that up actually. It is James Horner. That's
So
why that
good.
makes so much sense.
So good.
Oh,
They
R.I.P. to
they had
James
the real
Horner
life
and
Field
James
of
Earl
Dreams.
Jones. Two Jameses.
When they do the real life Field of Dreams games and they had the music playing, it just hits. And then seeing all the baseball players coming into like the accurate, obviously not cotton, because despite what George Costanza said, it doesn't really breathe. Um, that music, it's fantastic.
yeah, because this got nominated for Best Writing Screenplay based on material from another medium and Best Picture.
It didn't
What
win
won in
anything, right?
'89?
What was that, Sean? I mean, Shane. Wow. What was that?
What won in '89?
Best Picture?
Yeah.
Driving Miss Daisy.
Oh, okay.
So it lost to so
God damn it. Oh,
To stay
you
on the
couldn't.
topic of the dad, though. Oh, I'm sorry.
no,
I
you
was
go.
just gonna say, I guess you couldn't get more American than racism. Damn. But Do the Right Thing probably should have won, right?
I don't even think that was nominated.
It
No,
would
it
have been the
definitely
right thing to
wasn't.
win.
Oh,
Definitely
that was
wasn't.
'89 too.
Yep. Oh no, because notoriously Spike Lee is very angry about driving Miss Daisy.
Because he also lost Best Picture to The Green Book. He
Oh,
won, Best Screenplay. Black Klansman still lost, and he made a comment about that. He's like, every time I get nominated for Best Picture, I always lose to a white savior movie
In a car.
and a car. Yeah,
At least the newest Green Book was more progressive. The white person was driving the car.
there you go.
There you go.
But Kevin, you were gonna say something about the dads.
Oh yeah, just to touch back on that topic. I did appreciate how that arc went. Because Shane, you were talking about how we get that scene at the end of the movie where he's finally playing catch with his dad, but it does hit so hard because he spends a good chunk of the movie actually, and I would say usually when he's talking to his wife, usually saying kind of more negative things about his father. Uh,
mhm.
he spends a good chunk of the movie talking about how he doesn't want to be like him, right? Missing out on that connection with him,
Mhm.
and that he finally patches it by the end. So I like how he did a 180 by the end of the movie.
I kind of want to add on that too, Kevin, because watching this movie again as an adult, I think you really appreciate the fact that in the beginning of the movie, it's established that his father was so much older by the time he was a kid.
Right, I was
That,
thinking that too.
yeah, because it makes sense that he's unable to have a catch with his dad, who's probably like 60 or 70 by the time he wants to have a catch with him.
I
All I
was
know
trying to
is
do the
that,
math on that. Yeah.
yeah, all I know is that Kevin Costner did cry, did get choked up because he thought about his experiences growing up, that he never really got to have a catch with his dad. So that scene really does hit.
That makes me think of my grandfather a little bit because with that age, yeah, I was trying to do the math. I don't remember
He
if
was
they
like
gave
80.
specific years, but he's saying
Yeah.
like, I'm a child of the '60s, and he was talking about his dad doing things throughout the 1920s.
And saying his dad was born in like 1890 or like
Oh yeah,
like he
I was
was
thinking,
really old.
yeah, they made it sound like his dad was an adult during the '20s.
Yeah.
My grandfather was born 1919, so
As
my dad's from the
somebody,
'60s. So I was thinking maybe it's similar, but no, it seems like a bigger age gap than that even. Like yeah, late 1800s. Yeah,
Yeah.
they might
That's
have showed it in a newspaper or something, but
I didn't really
big
think
age
about
gap.
that. I just know that like he had an older dad, like that idea, and like that's it. Like his dad wanted to have a catch with him, and like he wouldn't have a catch with his dad.
That had to exacerbate some of the issues he already had with
Yeah.
him too.
Hmm. What
Struggling to relate.
as somebody with daddy issues, who it took until like I was an adult to actually have a relationship with my dad. Um, this hits, and it's an interesting perspective of like, do I necessarily forgive how my dad was when I was a kid? No, like he didn't do what he should have done as a father, but like as an adult. I can see past the fact that like my dad's a flawed human being, and I can have some kind of relationship with him at this point. And like this film really captures that, like it's that feeling of like throwing around other random movie references here, but like No Country for Old Men when Tommy Lee Jones is like, I have my father was there by the fire. I'm older now than he ever was. And it's like that interesting perspective of like Ray's looking at his dad and he's older than his dad in that moment. And it's such an interesting experience to try to contemplate. Because like I know like I'm having a bit of a feeling because I am now older than my parents were when they had me. Um and having that like shit, I don't want to be an old dad. Uh kind of thing. And it's just like processing that kind of feeling. This film deals with a lot of very complex feelings and issues and does it in such a way that feels so accessible, despite the fact that it's about ghosts and shit.
What I
Like,
like is how they make it so wholesome, basically, you
yes,
know? It's very approachable. I can definitely see why you would have watched this as a kid. Uh, to
like
those of you that did.
this and Major Leaguer up there is my two favorite baseball movies.
Oh,
Major League, very different experience watching this, but
I do also want to say too, because it brings up a good point. I don't know if it's considered a plot hole or anything, because sometimes the ghosts would know their life after or when their whole lives. Like they wouldn't just
Oh
be a
yeah,
snapshot of
right.
how old they are. They know that they live longer. They even know how they die, because that's where you get the conversation of this being heaven. Because at some point they're like, "How am I still here? I'm dead." Because then it really makes the scene better at the end with the dad having a catch with his son, because he never got to see his wife. He never got to see those things and be able to see his grandchild and see his wife, but knowing that this is the he's not a snapshot. He knows it's his son. Like
yeah.
that's it's nice.
Well, and you have the because like there's some really strong moments with like I think the best part of Ray Liotta's performance was when he talked about how being banned from baseball was like being an amputee. And like that was like damn. And then even something fun like Art LaFleur's character Chick Gandil, the first baseman, he's just like, wow, I feel great. I died and whenever, like I haven't had a smoke in
Like
like
60 years.
18
Oh
years.
yeah.
Just there's so many great moments with that.
Now, if someone
And
had gone to the store and bought him a cigarette, could they have passed it off to him physically?
well,
I
they could have a
think you.
catch with a
Yeah,
ghost, so I'm assuming you could give them a cigarette.
that's true. I don't know how the rules work exactly. So,
Well, and that's the thing. The
is it
movie
limited to
isn't
baseball tech?
Well, I mean,
the
if I was dead, I'd want a cigarette. I don't want a cigarette.
what's gonna do to me now? It's like the only rule that mattered in this was they can't leave the field. And
Yeah.
damn, that scene with
Oh, I
the
love.
daughter with
Yeah.
Karen, and that's such a great shot of which also Frank Whaley, who plays Archie when he's younger, he's a pretty famous character actor too, as well.
Hmm.
And you see him like in the crowd, and you can tell the moment he makes that decision, like, I have to do this. And that shot of the one foot turns into the slack with the chew on, and then the other one, and it just pans up. And Burt Lancaster with some good old fashioned just like smack the kid on the back until she coughs up her hot dog. And
Doctor from the 70s. I mean, he had the black bag and everything. That's what they did.
oh, and the that whole interaction with Ray when he's like, if I only got to be a doctor for 5 minutes, that would have been tragic. It's just like, damn. And it's so funny because what popped in my head, and this is also going to be a weird reference, is Wayne's World 2. Because did you need an amazing actor to be Moonlight Graham? It's a relatively smaller part. But like you go the distance and you get somebody like Burt Lancaster because he sells every single second. It's like that scene. I don't know how many of you have seen Wayne's World 2, but he's like, "Do you know where this like place is?" And the guy's like, "Yeah, yeah, it's down like this, blah 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 blah." It's like, "Oh, I knew a girl there." And then Wayne just turns the camera, just like, "I know this is like a small part, but like, could we have gotten like a better actor here?" And they bring Charlton Heston out, and he's like, "Oh, I remember that. I used to know a girl there." And like he like looks off into the middle distance, and like it's so much deeper. And then Wayne's just like tearing up because it's like that's how important casting is. And Burt Lancaster is such a great addition to this. And one little added nugget that I freaked my wife out by saying this. So you know how he went back in time from to 1972 when The Godfather was one of the top 10
Oh,
films of the
right.
year and
Yeah,
stuff like
that
that?
was a funny little thing to see on the marquee, by the way.
Yep. And if you put that in perspective, that would be like us going back to 2007.
Ooh, ooh.
Speaking of 2007, you mentioned there will be not there will be blood.
Yeah, No Country for Old Men.
Yeah.
That would have been on the marquee, yeah.
Yeah,
Damn. Now
that
this
and Spider-Man
conversation's
3.
coming full circle. But
Or
no,
or super bad.
I just want to do a spoof of this in 2024, and it's like I look at like instead of Nixon, it's Trump, and then it turns it's like super bad on the marquee. Oh no, sorry. No, that would be 2024. Ugh.
Oh.
2007, I guess. Oh no, 2008. I guess it would have been. It wouldn't be George W. Bush running for re-election. He would have
Oh,
been
you'd have the
wrapping up his
Obama
8 years.
games poster, yeah.
It would have one of those hope posters right
Yeah, the
there.
whole posters, yeah.
Um, somebody watching a Sarah Palin interview. Um,
Oh, so I think it's funny you brought up Charlton Heston, by the way, because I was going to say something similar, but I've never seen Wayne's World. But when Burt Lancaster just suddenly showed up in the movie, again, I haven't seen Wayne's World, but I was thinking of Tombstone when Charlton Heston shows up out of nowhere in that movie.
and it's just
It's
like
like, wow, they went hard on the casting for that.
it was funny. I was
Very
just writing
minor
about
role.
Tombstone where he's just like he has like 2 lines, and he's just
Yeah.
like, "Well, if they want to get to him, they'll have to go through me." And I'm just like, they went all out just to have Charlton Heston act like a tough guy.
Well,
Sometimes you
what? I
gotta.
think I think it's very endearing when like a big time actor, especially one from like decades ago, like all this time later doesn't feel like that they're too good for like a small supporting role, and like like you said, Burt Lancaster, he came into this role and like he really gave it everything he could, and like like it just goes to show that like, he didn't have like, oh, I'm only a leading man mentality. Like he actually put his heart into this performance.
Yeah, and it didn't feel like a cameo, to your
It's funny
point,
we're
Corey. It
talking
just,
about that because
fit the
casting,
role.
yeah, it's funny we're talking about casting being such a big deal because and, giving it your all because the movie I'm thinking about is Transformers the movie where Orson Welles shows up to play Unicron, which is probably the most memorable.
Really?
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's
that
I
was
didn't know he was in
100%
any of
a
those
paycheck
movies.
movie.
it
for
was
him.
that was a paycheck movie
You
for
just
him.
blew my mind.
Yeah, but Leonard Nimoy playing the next version of Megatron, he didn't get he gave it his all, and that was a pretty iconic character. But yeah,
I
definitely
think
look it up. Orson Welles is Unicron.
I I seriously think that James Earl Jones or Burt Lancaster should have been nominated for Best Supporting Actor for this movie.
Absolutely.
Like, for real.
He had a
Like,
pivotal role, even if it was small.
Well, and can you imagine sitting at the Oscars and them just having like the James Earl Jones speech? Like, come now. Like, that's
In
just an
my
Oscar clip right there.
the moment they approach what it's
Baseball.
going to be.
And it's just, oh my God. This movie is it's charming. It's magical. It just has such a atmosphere and aura about it. And like this makes you appreciate the magic of baseball, but also the magic of movies because this film really feels magical.
It does.
And there's not a whole lot of films that strike that specific kind of chord. But I guess was there anything else that any of you wanted to specifically bring up about the film?
Two things. One being, again, we can't talk enough about Burt Lancaster, Moonshine's character. Um, but as a kid, I always thought, it felt unfair that he couldn't really get the play. Like he abandons that. But then I'm watching it again. I'm like, not really, because he got to wink at the pitcher. He got to play it. He got to play a whole game, like, and then go
Yeah.
becoming a doctor. So he got to live. So his dream and being able to like kind of thank, Ray for that did, feel very heartwarming because as a kid I didn't really get it, but watching it I'm like, oh, his character had a full his character does have a full arc. It's really good. But the second thing that I was kind of thinking about with this film was the fact that, you know, it is so magical, and the fact that Major League Baseball does appreciate it to the point where I guess Field of Dreams last year they didn't go to the Field of Dreams, but they went to a different stadium,
They went to a Negro League field.
which is
Yep.
that's great too because that's still it's kind of the same theme of what the Field of Dreams game is. But the fact that this is still an ongoing thing in Major League Baseball is very impressive.
They this movie Kevin and I kept joking about this. This movie is brought to you by Major League Baseball and the state of Iowa. Um basically I wouldn't be surprised if both those entities wound up giving a lot of money to this budget.
I
Because
I was the slogan should just be "We're not heaven, we're Iowa." It should,
That
that's a
would
state
kill as a
motto.
slogan. Yeah.
it should just be the state motto.
Like this is the most famous thing about Iowa. Like probably like ever, to be honest.
100%, 100%.
Which it's so for those that don't pay a whole lot of attention to geography, what's so impactful about the Chicago Black Sox scandal is that the two closest teams to Iowa are the Cubs and the White Sox because Iowa's right next to Illinois.
Hmm.
I don't think enough people pay attention to like the
Oh,
Midwest of our country and how that's all lined up. But
Yeah.
like the reason the White Sox played in the first Field of Dreams game was because they're the home team. Because I have a couple of friends from Iowa and they're Chicago sports fans.
interesting. I
So
see. It's funny because like I don't think about that. I always get Idaho and Iowa confused.
yeah, Idaho's much more of like a Washington State football and like a sports family
Like
fan
Seahawks.
place. They're
Okay.
probably Mariners fans and Seahawks fans because Idaho's right next to Washington. But no, it's such an interesting experience watching this film. And it's very interesting having watched this with Kevin, who was watching it for the first time, because like I've watched this movie so many times. Like I hadn't watched this in a while, but I knew like this whole thing like the back of my hand. I think it had been 7 years since I watched this last. So because I keep a spreadsheet
Oh wow.
of my movies that I watch. So there you go. Anything else?
Uh, yeah, so kind of more of an aside, but for the whole movie, when I was watching this with you yesterday, Shane, I was trying to remember where I remembered the wife from,
Hmm.
played by Amy Madigan. So I just looked it up.
Well, it's funny to say that because I was doing the same thing.
Yeah, the only other movie I have seen her in besides this, and this must be where I recognized her from, was Gone Baby Gone.
Also 2007.
Also 2007, directed by Ben Affleck, who, along with Matt Damon, was an extra in Field of Dreams in the Fenway Park scene.
Oh wow.
Can they get any more Boston than that?
That little
you
tidbit
know.
surprised me. I was like, okay,
It all comes together.
it all came together. Also, apparently the character played by James Earl Jones, what was it, Dr. Mann?
Terrence Mann, yeah.
Terrence Mann, was originally in the novel the author J.D. Salinger. That's a little weird. I'm glad they changed
But
it
it
up,
makes
actually.
sense because J.D. Salinger is a bit of a recluse.
Yeah.
Speaking of Matt Damon, he would go on to play in Interstellar, which we talked about, a
Oh,
character
Dr.
Man.
Mann.
named Dr. Mann.
Dr.
Which
Mann,
is like
crap.
the most on the nose character naming of a character ever.
So what we can gather from this is that in real life, Matt Damon has gone through the portal,
Yes.
and he has affected his roles because of it.
We're turning into the Charlie Day meme from It's Always
Just
Sunny.
a cork board with all the yarn.
Carol,
So
Carol, there is no Carol.
so we're on this thread, and I have to add to it is the girl Karen, the daughter, is still an actress today.
Yeah, because
Gabby,
she was in that movie with
She
Joaquin
was
Phoenix
good.
a couple years ago. The one that was in black and white. I can't remember what it was called.
come on, come on.
Yeah.
So I specifically am like, I just watched the mini series on Netflix called Eric with Benedict Cumberbatch, where he plays like a puppeteer of like a kid's television show and his son's kidnapped. And his wife is Gabby Hoffman, who plays the little girl in and plays Karen in this. It's crazy. Because then I'm like, holy crap, she does actually look exactly the same, just grown up and older. Um, but it's so interesting because like Ray Liotta didn't have like this was his big break. Like
Oh
Field of
yeah.
Dreams was his first big role, and then he was in Goodfellas the next year. So that was pretty legit. But then you have people like James Earl Jones and Burt Lancaster who just had a lot of weight to that. But no, this is it's certainly a wonderful film that, I feel like a lot of sports movies, like unless like you appreciate a lot more if you're a fan. This is the kind of baseball movie you can really appreciate even if you don't like baseball.
Mhm.
Because I feel like it works on so many different levels. Because it's not really about playing baseball.
Well,
Right.
It's
You can
about
replace it with anything.
it's just like Moneyball. Like that movie wasn't. I mean, yeah, that one was a little more like compared to Field of Dreams.
that one
Moneyball
was about math.
no, but no, I was gonna say like when you compared to Field of Dreams, yeah, like Moneyball was a little more about playing baseball, but but like you just said, like it was really all about like the behind the scenes math and thinking that goes behind
Yes.
it.
It's a math movie. And we love that.
Hey,
At least
hey,
I do.
hey, what? I'm not a fan of baseball and I don't like math, but I loved Moneyball.
That only hurt me a little bit, Vinny. Just a little. But anyway. Oh, well, that is another spirited, interesting, and all over the place conversation here on the Movie Club. Because we're fun like that. But from Joe, Kevin, and Vinny, and myself, thank you for tuning in. Next month, we actually know what we're going to be talking about because how we wound up figuring this out. And we're going to be talking about the Red Shoes from directors Emmerich Pressburger and Michael Powell. I'm particularly excited about this.
Going
And
from
if you're
shoe go,
listening,
going from
oh,
shoeless Joe to the red shoes.
there you go. I had a whole joke lined up.
Oh, I'm
If you're
sorry.
listening,
Was it
if you're
Applebee's? Who we
watching or
taking to
listening,
Applebee's?
Mister, if you're watching or listening, Mister Scorsese, we'd love to have you on to talk about one of your favorite movies, The Red Shoes. No pressure though, But thank you all, as always, for tuning in and supporting the Development Hell podcast.